Once again, happy holidays, folks. I hope everyone had a wonderful Christmas and a good holiday season so far. But of course, while the snow is coming down here, it definitely is not outside. There, let me turn on my light just to make things a little bit more festive. But, I wanted to spend a bit of time today to talk about the full set list that dropped for DBTO4, kind of Bushiroad's Christmas present to us. DBTO4 itself released in Japan on Christmas Eve, actually. So it's kind of like perfect timing for people to make it a Christmas gift for other people. But this dropped on Wednesday or Thursday. I can't remember exactly which day. I think it might have been Thursday. And I haven't really had the time to sit down and take a look at it and talk about my first impressions of the set. We have had WGP Tokyo that gave us the first competitive results of this set already this weekend, and it was like one of the biggest events in Japan this entire year. But I wanted to kind of talk about my impressions of the set in general, how I think the 15 different ride lines are kind of like working in the after this set, and how I think some certain decks are going to be looking. I think later this week we're going to talk about the competitive results that happened over this weekend as well. There were a lot of tournaments that give us a good impression of what the meta looks like, and some decks that are surprisingly topping a lot too. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So we're here on the Japanese website for Vanguard, and we can see basically the full set list in the gallery form for DBTO4. So I think we're going to talk about things in terms of nations and their respective ride lines. So starting off with Nirvana, I think while people weren't as hyped about Mahar Nirvana and didn't think it was as good, the deck that we've been seeing kind of pop up already very early on, even before tournaments happened, was the clustering wishes, whatever, like the order that draws you a bunch of cards when you overdress build, because you essentially just spam overdresses. And then the interesting thing about Esperal Idea and Expecta is that you can Expecta on top of Esperal Idea to make it have like a bajillion power, which is pretty cool. And so against anti-removal matchups, I mean non-removal matchups rather, that's pretty good. But of course, most things in the meta do have removal in some form. And of course, I think that Esperal Idea as a card itself is already pretty good, because the resound doesn't require you to be an overdress, so you can actually not commit much to it and still be able to use it as a strong restander. And it's just a better Expecta. I think that's kind of what it is. Oh, sorry, not a better Expecta, a better Valiente. Although people still do run Valiente with it too, because that's still a good card to go into, or a good card to have under it, I suppose. But I think Mahar Nirvana is actually carrying the deck a lot more than people thought as well, because with the order you get to draw a bunch. You counterblast generally less, I want to say, in this deck now, or I guess it's more or less the same. It's just that you have other forms of CC now if you don't play Urger. So I think Nirvana overall is fine. Looking at some of the other support, it got no double rares essentially. You got the new draw trigger, and then there's the the booster grade 3 that revives grade 0, so it can boost the Trickstar, I guess, if you want to play the Urger form. Then there's a grade 1 guy who counterblasts to salvage an overdress and then countercharge. And then there's the order that Soul Blast 1 to countercharge as well. When your overdress possessing unit actually attacks the Vanguard, you countercharge 1. So if you give that to a Esperal Idea, you actually Soul Blast 1 to countercharge 2, which is quite good. But I don't think I've seen too many people play this card. And of course the draws are, for every nation, 10k draws are amazing. They're pretty expensive from what I've seen. Some shops are charging in Japan between $3 and $10, so we're gonna do a usual kind of early prices video later on next week as well. In terms of commons, there's also this duo that searches out your, basically searches out your your Nirvana grade 4, which is okay. But aside from that, I think most of the support is it's basically just the new Verina and the new Nirvana. Everything else apart from that is kind of either generic or meant for other things. And for some reason they still hide the DSRs. Why? Because we already know these are Verina, Esperal Idea, as well as Mahar Nirvana, but they're still not on the official website for God knows what reason, despite the set already being out. And I hope they don't make that a practice going forward. I think keeping the VSR secret like that, sure was exciting to find out about them, but why are they still hidden when the set is already out? I don't really like that practice, so I hope they stop doing that. Then for the other, Trick Moon, of course, is buff Sakura support. We're going to talk about that in a bit. But I think for Eugene, it got some interesting cards. They have Travis, who's a pretty good, he soul charges, he's a 20k attacker, and he also retires stuff, which is pretty good, honestly, for just a card on its own. And then there's some other generic kind of removal in this, in the support as well. So I think Eugene got a little bit, definitely not super amazing still, but it got the good support last set, so I guess it didn't really get as much this set. And then for Overlord surprisingly actually saw some results. Both Overlord and PBD have seen some results over the weekend, and I think that Overlord got the most out of the commons, surprisingly. So there's this grade 3 guy who, when your Vanguard's tech hits, you can bounce him back to hand, which is pretty good. So you basically can throw him down as an attacker and then attack with Overlord into the rear and then bounce both of them back, so you can keep them in hand to just discard for PGs or whatever, honestly, or just reuse them as attackers that can't be attacked into, which is pretty good, I think. And then the Blitz order that Overlord got is really good. If your Vanguard is an Overlord, then choose one unit and give it 20k power for no cost. that's pretty good. 20k shield for no cost is definitely very nice, and I think adds a lot to Overlord as a deck. So I think that overall, like, Overlord got quite a good bit of good stuff too. But the highlight I think definitely is Buff Sagara. Like, Buff Sagara got some good support. I think she is a pretty strong deck. I wouldn't call her tier 1 necessarily. I think she looks quite strong because Trick Moon is a really good card that just gives you counter charge and a really strong boost to any column, which is also very good. The Spear is an amazing order, giving you the turn 3 double equip. I like this double rare as well, that gives you like a potential also double equip on turn 3, and it's also a good attacker, so I think you do want to run it. And aside from that, they got some like bonus power cards essentially, and like filter cards like this guy that basically let you just like filter out if you have too many weapons and get a bit of power. So I think the biggest weakness of Buff Sagara in the start deck was her like rear power, so I think they adjusted that. I think the rear power is better now, especially thanks to Trick Moon. So I think the deck overall is going to be quite strong, and actually got some results in Japan already, which is also good. So that's it for Dragon Empire. Let's talk about Dark States real quick. Bruce, I think a lot of people say that Bruce felt like the worst of the Great Force because it's just like, you know, you drop Leonard, like the whole deck changes. But the interesting thing is that Bruce in combination with this guy, the Grade 1, who says you soul charge when you call him, and then his other skill is when your card goes to your soul by a soul charge ability, if your Vanguard is Grade 3 or higher, he gets plus 5k. And of course that's basically like a Doreen the Thruster kind of, and essentially you get to just soul charge a bunch. You make him into like a 43, 48, 53 or whatever from like mass soul charging with like Pandemonium tactics and whatnot, and then Bruce restands himself and also the front or rear. So if you have two of this guy who's swinging for huge numbers, plus Bruce that has like a crit from a Richard, from a Brian or whatever, it's actually pretty good. So I think surprisingly this is the combo that people play for Bruce these days, and I'm actually quite impressed. We also saw topping Bruce list that just ran literally DB2 of free Bruce and topped as well, just with the new draws. So that's also interesting. And then the bunny, this guy's like mainly Greedon support, but also works for Barrow, and we've seen Greedon not like, people are rating it kind of low, but I think this card itself is really good, being able to just like extend your calls when he goes to soul. So also in premium, very nice. But I think in Greedon both, and also in Barrow, is also very nice. There's also the like this cat that's also nice for both Greedon and Barrow, but for Barrow they got an exclusive Grade 2 double rare that lets you can almost one discard 1 to tutor anything from your soul, and then soul charge 1 if you have 7 or more soul, and if you have 13 or more soul, your front row gets plus 5, which like if you play 2 of these, that's pretty damn good, right? It's a really nice card. There's also the Bruce, like kind of like the Leonard replacement. When placed on rear, count 1, give 5k, and if he's in final rush, soul charge 1, I think, or 2, and then choose a card from your soul, call it to an empty rear circle. So kind of like a Leonard replacement, but it's not exactly like the best. But I think overall, like all 3 decks here for Dark States are really nice. So I think that it's actually quite good support. But I think like for Barrow in particular, the highlights are the Grade 1 triple rare and this Grade 2 double rare. Like those have been really the highlights for the deck in my opinion. And of course the new draws are also very nice. And I think in terms of commons, there wasn't as much this time around for the 2 decks. There's an interesting 15k base Grade 3 that if you don't have a, no sorry, that's Brian K, we'll talk about that later. But aside from that, I think there wasn't really as much in the common slots that like stood out to me too much, outside like this rat, I guess, who like when your Vanguard attacks and you have 3 or more standing units, you can retire him to soul charge I think 2, and then you choose a card with the same name as your Vanguard and put it on top of your deck, which is interesting, I guess. It's an interesting card. I don't think it's like super great, so I think the high rarity slots for Dark States definitely carry it. Rankade, sadly, like is very much like highs and lows. I think Seraph Purelight is one of the biggest highs, but Pureline is like the Seraph deck in general is still looking to have like a bit of a early game, and then you really need to like keep rewriting Purelight to keep using her effect. So once you reach turn 4, the deck is insanely good, but until you reach turn 4, a lot of decks can blow you up, and we're seeing quite a few decks like that pop up in the meta right now that can play super aggro early game. You know, things like even like Barrow, to be honest, can play really aggressive early game and kind of like beat Seraph before she even gets to the Purelight. But I think in general this is probably the strongest of the Grade 4s, just because it is really good. Like being able to, you know, imprison 6, you know, 2 from hand, 2 from soul, 2 from field is really good, but you do need to rewrite for it. And on top of that, you know, being able to get that scaling power and crit to the front row depending on how much is in prison is also really nice. Orphis on the other hand honestly got kind of screwed this set. This Grade 3 is really not that good. Like the only application for it is like killing your old Shadow Me tokens to make new ones with the order that powers up in play, but that's literally it. So I don't think Orphis really got much out of this set. Gravidia though was was really good. Gravidia got some amazing support, got recycling for the first time, which is really good. And on top of that, a lot of people are playing around with like Gravidia with some Orphist pieces, because like Gravidia still lacks really good attackers and boosters. So people are just playing some of the Orphist cards and like world cards in Gravidia lists to kind of compensate for that, which I think is quite interesting. And so this guy, for example, is played in Gravidia, who's like a 10k booster basically, as long as you're in Dark Knight, and you can intercept from the back. But then if you're in Abyssal Dark Knight, he also has plus 10k shield, which of course you don't go into in Gravidia, but you know, it's not bad, it's interesting. And then this is like the recycler that's quite good. Seraph Snow also has this broken grade 1 that like searches out for a copy of herself when she's played for free if you have 3 more imprisoned, which I think is really good. So I think that overall, like, Brancgate outside of Orphist got really good support. There's this really interesting grade 3 as well that says like in back row rearguard circle, when your opponent's rearguard is placed from other than their hand, you can rest it. So it's once per turn, but if you have multiples of her, that can be really annoying. There's a pretty good like blitz order for Orphist that lets you count +1, and then for each Shadow Army token on the board, get plus 10k to a unit. But it kind of goes against the playstyle of like wanting to kill your own tokens for effects. I don't really know. And then the really amazing Hell Hazard, amazing order for Gravidia, I think is really, really good. Just basically gives you a way to have one order count as 2, which is already very, very nice, but of course it banishes itself. And then I think for the commons, like I talked about the 15k base grade 3, he's okay. A lot of the commons are quite meh, unfortunately, for most of Brancgate, except for this order that's like, what, Soul Blast 2 or Soul Blast 1? I kind of need to zoom in on these. It's Soul Blast 2 to choose all of your opponent's back row rearguards and imprison them. So I think that card is actually quite good. Like, it's a pretty cool field wipe that, like, because it targets all, even if they have like resist stuff or like a trick star in the back row, it should normally target, because it doesn't target, right? It takes all back row, so that's quite good. So that's it for Brancgate. I think overall, like, Gravidia and Seraph are huge winners. Like, obviously I think some of the best decks right now. Orphist, sadly, I don't know why. Like, I don't even, like, it's not that Orphist was as amazing as Bruce in the past that he deserves to get lackluster support. It's literally, he's always been asking for a little bit more every time, and this time we're asking for way more. Keter Sanctuary, I think we have a lot of winners in Keter. Hexorb feels like I got really good stuff, but it's still lacking that kind of like hard plus. You know, I've talked to like Hexorb Banes, and they're saying like, yeah, we have amazing cool like restand combos now and stuff like that, and like really cool like pressure like plays, but it's lacking that just like raw bonus draw power, like bonus plussing outside of like Diaglass. And so like people are asking for a bit more of that basically, so we'll see if we get that in the future. Bastion, actually really nice. Like, I've seen a lot of different Bastion lists. Some still run Ragrail, some don't run Ragrail, some run this guy, some don't, right? Some play Dark Strain, some don't. And so I think like Bastion has a lot of different ways to be built. Same with Bruce, to be honest. Those decks have really many different approaches to the deck building aspect, and I think that overall, like, Bastion is a really strong deck overall, but you need to make sure you keep drawing your Bastions. That's why people play like 4 regular grade 3 Bastion and 4 of the grade 4, because you have to discard a Bastion. So that's why it's so important. This other triple I think is fine. It's just like all the soul using ones feel a little bit shaky. They might get better in the future when, like, I guess Bastion gets more soul charge, but for the time being it is fine. Same goes for this guy that like draws you cards. And then what other Bastion support was there? This guy's insane though. This rare, the Furient, he is drawn by Hagia Sensei, and he drew like Aglovale and like a lot of amazing other arts like Zenith. So this guy is basically like, if he stands by your Vanguard, or like if your Vanguard is Prime, then he is a 18k attacker, so 20k with Prime's ability, and when he stands by Vanguard's effect, he gets another 5k if your Vanguard is a grade 3 or higher. So really strong attacker for literally free, so it's even stronger of an attacker than Alden, which is really cool. This random grade 1, her effect isn't anything good, but she's drawn by Lukir's Artist, which I think is definitely worth pointing out. We've seen this guy played in Phantom Blaster Dragon, so this is a when discarded from hand, Soul Blast 1 and call it as rest, and then when this unit stands, you can give it intercept, and it can intercept from the back row. So I guess it's cool because you can discard it for a cost, or like I don't know, like right deck, Soul Blast 1 to call it as rest and then retire it for PVD's effect. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. For commons, there's also some interesting ones as well. There's this like defensive grade 3 for Bastion, but it's 12k base, and like I've seen people not really be huge fans of it. Bastion's Artist drew a really beautiful grade 2 as well. Like, I don't want to zoom in just to show you how amazing it looks. And this grade 1 is also nice. Like, in rear and trigger zone, it counts as a grade 3 if your Vanguard is Bastion Prime, and it also gets 5k extra, so it's a 12k, I guess. And then this girl carries on like Salome's tradition of carrying a flag, so she's kind of like Salome and like carrying that flag. So maybe Salome's descendant in the lore, that would be quite cool to see. PBD also got a pretty cool blitz order, like a attacked blaster Vanguard gets 15k, and then you can kill one of your rears to give it another 15k. So It's pretty good. It's actually not a bad order as well. So I think I'm quite a big fan of all the all of that support in here. But so that's for Bastion, right? We talked about Bastion there mostly. Hexor basically got this grade 1 that lets you restand one of your rears, which is quite cool. Like she says, if you drive check a trigger at the end of that battle, if your Vanguard is Hexorb, then you can Calmas 1, Soul Blast 1, choose a rearguard, stand it, and retire this unit. And of course, standing rearguards in a deck that has so much pressure with like putting crits on stuff and etc is really good, obviously. And this, you know, makes it so you don't have to play like that grade 3 restander anymore from stat 1, and she's just a really good card overall. And then they also got this card which says like when your unit's attack ends, Calmas 1, and depending on which trigger came out, you can do the following. So if a crit came out, then you choose an opponent's rear guard, put it to the bottom of the deck, and if a front came out, then you choose your opponent's grade 2 or lower rear guard, and you choose your grade 2 or lower rear guard and stand it. So it's more of that like stand synergy. So I think this, like, both of those cards are really good for Hexorb, and so you can also use cards like this that work off being stood by an effect to also use them in Hexorb, because now you have so much like rearguard standing, which is also very nice. I think the commons and rares we already talked about for PBD and Hexorb, but so that's like for Hexorb, they basically got like cool new restanding text, which I think is quite nice. I think it's quite nice, and like this grade 3 is very generic for and can be used in Hexorb as well. So I think that overall, like, the triples are quite good for Keter. PBD got a top, and I've been seeing people on Discord going like PBD is actually good now, and I was like, what? So we talked about that grade 1 5k like cat earlier, right? But then there's this girl who says like when she's placed from hand on rear, if you have a Blaster Vanguard, discard 1, look at top 2 and call 2 unicards from among them as rest, and then put the discard the rest. So that obviously fuels PBD's effect for discard 1, which is good. Like, it's still a plus that then turns into a minus because of PBD, I guess, but it seems like PBD is getting better because it's getting cheaper and cheaper ways to use its effect, which is quite nice. Oh yeah, I didn't talk about this card for Hexorb as well. She's quite interesting. Like, when she attacks, if Vanguard is Hexorb or Pentagleam, discard 1, look at top 2, and then put like them on top or bottom in any order, and then gain 10k. It's pretty good. If you want to restand her, 20k attacker is definitely quite decent, but she has once per turn to keep that in mind. But yeah, like, I think both PBD, we talked about the Blitz Order already as well. Like, both PBD and Hexorb got some good stuff, and Bastion feels really good too. I think Hexorb might be lacking a bit of that like raw plus still, as I was talking about earlier, to kind of make it keep up with the meta, but I think Bastion definitely deserves to stand at the top as well. And finally we have Stoicheia. Stoicheia I think is a lot of people's big hype this set because they got really good cards. Zorga has turned into an aggro deck apparently, because this thing can just like basically when you play an order, he revives himself, and then you do one of the following. But then if you Alchemagic, you choose to do both instead of one. But that means if you play an order on turn 2 or on turn 1 even, and this thing is in the drop, that means that you can revive it as a 15k attacker or like whatever you want, and then just kill it off later on for whatever cost and then bring it back. Like, this card is surprisingly good. Let's talk about Magnolia first though. Magnolia, amazing grade 4 in my opinion, really good. Lets you like obviously +1 from riding it, and then on top of that, if you have a Magnolia on the border in the soul, all your rear guards can attack from the back row, can intercept from the back row, and every rear gets 5k. So you have a lot of attacks. They're strong because of the extra power. You can use Inlet Pulse Dragon, who says at the end of your turn, if you attacked 4 or more times this turn, he goes to soul and you draw 1, so he gives you the soul and the card draw on top of that. Like this, the Far's effect of course can only be used with Flagberg. We'll talk about Flagberg later, but Inlet Pulse is actually used in Magnolia list because of that second skill, which is already something to talk about. On top of that, this cat is really good, which is on place, use Soul Blast 1 and bring out another copy of himself from the drop to an empty rearguard circle, and if you call another one from drop and you have another one in like literally like you call one from hand, Soul Blast 1, call one from drop, and if you have another one in drop, you can Soul Blast 1 for that one and call another one, and like they can attack from the back row anyway, so you're basically Soul Blasting for plussing, and when they attack, if you have a Magnolia Vanguard, they're 14k attackers, so they're 19k with Magnolia's effect, which is really nice. Then there's this thing which is like a super generic card. At the end of your turn on rear, if you either Alchemagicked or you've attacked 5 or more times, you put this into soul, countercharge 1. So for both Magnolia and Flagberg, this is countercharge and a soul, and for Zorga, this is also soul and a countercharge, which is really good. Zorga got this grade 2 order that people at first thought wasn't that good, but it says it's a grade 2, you discard a order card from your hand to play it, and then you give your Vanguard +1 drive. I've seen screenshots of people use this on grade 2 and kill people, literally win on turn 2 because they just play super aggro Zorga that, like, you know, because you can play that and revive these guys as 15k attackers early and just like rush your opponent. Like, you can play super aggro Zorga now, which is a concept I never thought about, which is really, really interesting. So I think this order is also really good, and you can Alchemagic it too on your turn 3 if you need to. Then they got this nice Blitz order as well for Zorga, so you Soul Blast 1, draw 1 as a Blitz order, by the way, during your opponent's turn, which is really good. And then choose a unit, and then for every order card combined between your drop and your bind zone, that unit gets plus okay for that battle. So it's really good. It is really good. It's really, really good. But it has to be like different named order cards, right? So different name order cards, but that's the whole thing with Zorga, is that you use a dog and you play a bunch of 1-ofs to set up different name order cards. So it's pretty good Blitz in my opinion. This card is interesting. Salvager as well. Like overall, I think both Zorga and Magnolia got some really nice things and some really solid attackers at the same time. Some interesting new orders, of course, like there's a Flagberg order that just gives it 20k as a Blitz, just straight up for free, which is really cool. There's Ghost Pilk, you know, Pilk, everyone's favorite drink, which lets you like bring back cards. Like it's a normal order, lets you put back grade 2 or lower, or grade 2 or higher, sorry, normal units back to your deck, and then like on top of your deck, and then you can put it into the soul, which is interesting. Then this guy like back row is a 5k grade 1, but then every time your reguard attacks he gets plus 5k. So in Magnolia, as the final attack, this gets plus 25k, and you can count +1 to give another 5k on top of that, so you can really build them up to be huge. So overall, there's been some really interesting supports, I think, for like all the Stoicheia decks, and we've been mostly talking about Magnolia and Zorga so far, but also Flagberg. Like Flagberg got Inlet Pulse, which is probably the best card. It's like Coral Assault and Tidal Assault combined in one card, giving you first attack restand for Soul Blast 1, end of turn, go to Soul, draw a card. Like super generic, super nice, very, very good. Like this card is generic for Flagberg 2. This card, like, obviously is more Magnolia support focused because of the power-up skill as well. This can technically be used in everything if you play a bunch of orders, but obviously it is supposed to be for Zorga. And like they got a solid attacker for Flagberg 2, like when he attacks, if his Vanguard is a Flagberg, he gets plus 5k. So if you like restand him with something, he will regain another 5k because it is for that turn that he gains it. So that's also like a grade 2 to look out for. In terms of commons, I didn't see as much for Flagberg that stood out to me outside of like the Blitz order. So I think overall, like every deck got some nice support. Like Flagberg also just really got some nice things like in addition to what it had already. So I think overall, like this set is a banger. Unfortunately, because there's 15 triple rares, and I've heard that the JP box pull rates are 4 or 5 triple rares per box. I wonder what this will mean for the triples in our boxes and the ratios in our cases. So I wonder how that's going to go when the set comes out in mid-February, which is actually pretty soon. It's like in what, 5-6 weeks. So yeah, this set is really exciting. A lot of really cool decks, and overall, like you know, as an Orphis main, I'm a little bit sad. I think that's the only deck that really got bad things from this set. Everything else basically got something cool and something that really helps it. So good day for everyone but Orphis mains, I suppose. So yeah, those are my impressions of set 4. I think overall it is definitely a very exciting set. Definitely a lot of cool cards, a lot of cool decks are going to come out of this, and there's already a lot of, you know, tournament results coming out showing the new kind of like things that people are trying out with this set too. Grade 4s are a very welcome addition in my opinion, because they enable people to deck build in a more advanced way in standard, because now you choose, like, do you want to play a deck that's focused around Persona writing? Do you want to play a deck that's focused around the grade 4 with triple drive, or do you want to try to combine the two and do something with that? But anyway guys, enjoy the snow, enjoy the festivities. Thank you for watching today's video. Hope you guys liked my first impressions. If you have any of your own that you want to talk about in the comments, feel free to leave them down below. Check out all the other videos I've been doing lately. You know, we've been doing quite a bit of YouTube stuff this month, although it's been quite busy, so not as much as I would like to, but there's a lot more coming. Might even be double uploads some days because of all the Zero content I gotta do as well. But also I really want to like focus on set 3 stuff before BRO now, because there's a lot of things I want to cover in terms of decks. And of course, Buff Saga to upgrade video coming up very soon. I still have to test a few things, but it is coming, don't worry about it. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please give it a like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe. But otherwise, that's gonna be it for me today, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.